So I've got a question for you, and it's a pretty serious question. I want to know, can you tell the difference between name brand and generic? Now, I'll be honest with you, there's some things that I'm okay with generic, like peanut butter. Listen, I like Skippy and Jif just as much as the next guy, but I'm also really fine with good old-fashioned great value peanut butter from Walmart, or cinnamon toasters instead of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I'm good with either one. But there are some things that you should never, and I mean never, buy generic. Now, you might think I'm a little bit crazy, but Coca-Cola, that's one of those. Don't ever mess with that and try to give me cola. I mean, what is cola anyways? It's flat, tastes like cough syrup, and it's just terrible, right? So I want you to focus in here for a second, because I need you to realize how serious I am about this next one. Like, seriously, look right here. If there is one item that you should never buy generic, and I mean, don't ever let someone tell you, oh, it's just the same thing, you can't even taste the difference. If someone tells you that, look them in the eye, and you let them know that they sit on a throne of lies. Because you know what I'm talking about here? Oreos. There is no substitute for that perfect blend of chocolate and cream. There's no other cookie that holds the title of Milk's favorite cookie. You see, the only thing that can make an Oreo better is when you double stuff it. But when they try to give you this generic knockoff, it's not even close. Now, I know those are kind of some fun examples, but when we see an Oreo and we see a great value Twist and Shout cookie, they're easy to look at and to know what judgment we need to make about those cookies. But there's other things that we look at, though, that are a little bit more difficult to make that judgment call. But you and I, we make judgment calls every day, and some of those judgment calls are way more important than what cookie to eat or what soda we should drink. Some of the judgment calls that we make have the power to change our lives. So actually, Jesus talked about making a quick judgment call. So I want you to grab your Bibles, and I want you to look with me at Matthew chapter 7 and verses 1 to 5. It says this. It says, "Do not judge others, and you will not be judged, for you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. And why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend, 'Let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye,' when you can't see past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite, first get rid of the log in your own eye, and then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye." Have you ever heard the phrase, "Only God can judge me"? Maybe you've seen it in a movie, a show, a song. It's all over the place. But did you know that it actually comes from a verse, and it's actually something that Jesus said? Now, it's true, but it's also true that Jesus is often misquoted in this passage when people try to use that statement. So we just read about it, but what's he actually really trying to get here in these verses? Well, Jesus knows that his followers are in relationships with other people, and just like we know, relationships can get complicated at times. You see, we can disagree with people, and we can even think that the other person is sinning, and so we may feel like we need to call them out and help them by telling them all the things wrong that they're doing. But here's what I know, is that we judge people all the time. I know that I find myself doing that, and I'm sure you probably do it too. And it can be over something that someone says, something that they do, something that they believe, or even wear. We see the person, and then we decide that what we think about them and act toward them according to what we just decided. And it ends up becoming an us versus them situation. Like, I would never say what they just said, or I can't believe that she would act that way. I would never do that. When we act like that, it ends up killing the relationship, and it wrongfully puts us above other people in our thinking, and ultimately it's really pride. See, Jesus knows that we do this, and his desire is for relationships to be strengthened, not torn apart. So he says in verse 1, "Do not judge others, and you will not be judged." That word judge literally means to decide. Like when you have to choose between Oreos and Twist and Shout, you look at them and you decide what one is better, and you choose one over the other. Obviously the Oreo, right? You judge them and you came to a conclusion, and that's what Jesus is warning us against. And so has this ever happened to you? Have you ever been judged in your own life incorrectly? Man, I know I have, and it hurts. So why do we then judge other people? Jesus points out the problem that each of us has. And it's that our vision is affected by our sin. Jesus uses this really funny illustration to show us how crazy it is to judge other people before looking at our own problems. He says that as you look at someone to decide if they're right or wrong, you can't really see them well enough to judge them because you haven't stopped to check your own life first. You try to see this little thing that they have, but meanwhile, you're missing this giant pole that's sticking out of your head, coming out of your eye. Can you imagine that picture? Like you're trying to point out something to somebody else, but as you're trying to do that, you're walking around and there's this huge pole coming out of your eye, swinging around everywhere, hitting things, right? That pole is the sin that you and I have, and it's that sin that's getting in the way. And so get this. You need Jesus just as much as others. We're all equally in need of Jesus. You have sin in your life that makes it hard to follow Jesus. Just like having that pole sticking out of your head makes it hard for you to live, your sin keeps you from living right. And so instead of making quick decisions about whether someone else is right or wrong and then treating them like they're less than you, instead humble yourself. You need Jesus just as much as others. He's the only one who can help you. When you take that position, that helps to build relationships with other people because you realize that we all have the same need. And it stops us from living with an us versus them mentality. And instead, we live with a we all need Jesus mentality. So I know what you're thinking. So does that mean that I should never help people who are doing wrong? Should I just throw away everything that is right and just focus on myself? Well, no, not at all. But what it does mean is that we need to take a really hard look at our own lives first before we call other people out in theirs. So, what pole is in your head today? How do you need to start looking at yourself instead of judging everyone else around you? I love you guys, and we'll see you next week.